3751. A better life begins with Sheer Recovery. Call 888-743-3751 or go online at www.sheerrecovery.com.
Listen to KCAA Loma Linda for less confrontation and more information.
Welcome to U-Turn Radio. Let's turn it around. Here at U-Turn Radio, we believe in big-hearted communities and small governments. Join your hosts, Eric Steinman, Nadia Renner, and Tom Murphy, as we work to put local governments on a diet and champion the charities that support your communities.
Welcome to U-Turn. Welcome to U-Turn Radio. This is Nadia, Tom, and Eric will be joining us shortly. I really hope you guys are staying cool because it's been really, really hot. So I hope you guys are somewhere with the AC and staying hydrated out here in the Inland Empire.
Yeah, you know, we usually lead out with a little bit of comment about the weather, and it's hot, but it's not wet hot, so it's still a good hot.
What do you mean it's not wet hot? What's the difference?
Have you ever lived on the East Coast?
No.
If you lived on the East Coast, you'd understand what wet hot is.
Okay.
It's
humid?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's miserable.
Okay, well, I'm Costa Rican, so I think I understand the humid part. So now I get it. Well, if you're first time listening to U-Turn here, we believe in a small government and big-hearted communities.
Yeah, and we're certain that the Inland Empire is big-hearted. We've seen it already on the show. But we're also certain that local governments are big and growing bigger in terms of both their reach and their finances and that type of thing. We want to change that.
Absolutely.
And we want our listeners to join us.
And talking about joining us, you guys can always call 909-792-5222. That's 909-792-5222. And you can call us and let us know what your favorite charity is, because here at U-Turn, we definitely spin the wheel and we can give hundreds to thousands of dollars to your favorite local charity. And yeah, you heard it right. We've donated last weekend. We donated to the Humane Society of San Bernardino Valley, and they won $1,400. So you can really win some good money out here if you call in.
Absolutely. And the Humane Society of San Bernardino Valley is not associated with the Humane Society that I know of, but they do a little bit different work, but seem like a really good charitable organization.
Absolutely. Welcome, Eric. How are you? Staying cool under this hot weather? We're just talking about how hot it is out there.
Yeah. At Dodger Stadium last night.
Oh.
I can only imagine.
Special. That was probably not.
Yeah.
Well, last week we had a really good show, and we're doing part 2 to last week's show. If you didn't hear last week's show, we kind of went over what we call the toolbox review, and that's really kind of where we broke down what us as citizens can do to just have a little bit of power and put our part to kind of see changes, if we want to see changes within our community. And we're doing the second part this week. Last week we went over, the basic things that we know, which is the vote, for example, where you can just go and try to vote for what you believe or what you want to see change, and you would vote differently for whatever it is that you want. We also went over the initiative, right? Which was...
Yeah, but going back to the vote real quick, one of the I spent some time in the Navy, and one of the phrases that stuck with me was, "You get what you inspect, not what you expect." And how does that apply to the vote? The voting population really needs to be engaged in what's going on at the local level, because that's how they inspect what the local government bureaucracy is about and is doing. And if they're not getting what they expect from those services, then it's, the best way to do any of this is for engaged voters to go to the polls. The other things, the initiative, the referendum, et cetera, those are all tools. They're all available to use. But but they're more expensive. They take more effort, more involvement. It, Everything, if you ask me, starts first with a population of engaged voters that are watching to see what the local government is doing, and ensuring that they're not overreaching.
Right, and just to go back a little bit too, you can find all of the past episodes and last week's episode too on our website, uturnradio.com, and you can always also email us at info@uturnradio.com if you have any suggestions or want to give your opinion. We're more than welcome to get your call in or your email. But yeah, like we were saying, so the toolbox review is kind of like what we call the toolbox review, which is what you can do as a citizen. We just talked about the vote. Then there's the initiative, which requires 28,000 signatures, which I learned. I didn't know there was so many. And that's usually where, and this is what I've learned from last week, where you get somebody that's usually when you see that person in front of stores and they're getting the signatures for whoever's trying to put initiative for most part, correct?
Right, that's correct, and that signature gatherer is usually is almost always a paid professional, and they're, they make money gathering signatures, and the number of signatures required it's 10% of the number of the voters in the last gubernatorial election plus mistakes. So it in San Bernardino County that's right around 30,000 right now. But then you add in mistakes, and it's closer to 40,000 people that you got to go get to, sign your petition to get an initiative on the ballot and in front of the voters. There's a different way to do that, though, and it's much less expensive.
Which is?
Just convince 3 of the 5 Board of Supervisors to vote for putting a different, or let's say you have an ordinance or a change to the charter,
right?
The county charter that you'd like to implement. You can go the initiative way, and that'll cost you a lot of time and effort, or you can convince the Board of Supervisors, hey, put this before the people, and they have the ability to just go onto the ballot.
But when you say convince, how do you even get to speak to a supervisor to try to get them to, or try to convince them? When you say convince a supervisor.
That's a great question, and it's kind of, I think the answer would be somewhat, here's the world of politics,
right?
And everything from, I guess, if you will, very engaged.
Well, let me just give you an example. They became very convinced that they had to put something on the ballot in 2012 when we put something on the ballot that would have cut their pay. and all 5 of them got convinced real quick that they should put something on the ballot that was deceptive to the people, that they called transparency of all things. And everybody thought they were voting for transparency and a pay cut. And the pay cut passed with 64% of the vote, but didn't take effect because their transparency, which they put right above it on the ballot, passed with 65% of the vote. So that's one way to get them to think about it. But in the bigger picture, they're concerned about being reelected, certainly, probably foremost. And if there is a group of citizens that are engaged enough to help fund their reelection, where they don't have to rely on funding or the lack of opposition from public employee unions, from building developers, casinos, that type of thing, then they would probably be very open to putting stuff like this before the people without having to go through that signature gathering. And the economics of that are, if you want to go gather, as Tom says, 40,000 signatures in order to get 27,000 good signatures, the economics of that are, $800,000 approximately for paid signature gatherers to do that. So the normal Board of Supervisors race, there's maybe think the last one with Rutherford and that Steinnorth guy was $250,000 on one side and $450,000 on the other side, or something.
I think that sounds ballpark.
Something in that
yeah.
ballpark. So paying to get an initiative before the voters is somewhere in the zip code of what it takes to fund a supervisor's race. So
roughly like more or less 250,000 plus we're talking about?
well, she's an incumbent. Janice Rutherford spent about $250,000 and got reelected by a very small margin because she's an incumbent. So if you can expect, public employee unions, for instance, to put up $400,000 or $500,000 against you if they don't like something about you. So if you had an antidote to that, in effect, $400,000 or $500,000 of citizen money that was for just, hey, we want good government, that may be. And the quid pro quo to any extent was, hey, we'd like you to put some of this stuff before the voters. If they felt comfortable enough putting stuff before the voters that maybe the employee unions didn't like, then you might be able to get 3 of the 5 Board of Supervisors to do that.
But to your point, at the same time, here is you would have to have a lot of different citizens come together to try to have that type of change and try to, like you said, Tom, convince the supervisor for some type of change as well.
Yeah, but there's another thing that you can do when you talk about active citizens being involved in this. If there is 27,000 citizens out of the, how many people in San Bernardino County, Tom?
How many citizens?
Yeah.
It was like 2.4 million.
Yeah, so if you have 10% of the people in San Bernardino County that care enough and want good government and understand the, how it affects them from whatever group they're in, and we've tried to talk about that, how it affects everybody in the county when, you're not getting a reasonable result from what you pay for in your county government. If 10% of them care enough, then 10% of them can willingly sign a petition, be part of an online group, for instance, that you form, join this Red Brennan group that we have in place, for instance, and be ready when that we can put something on the ballot ourselves without all that expense either, just by getting the word out to the people who are involved, and then they will participate in signing these signatures just by, hey, yes, mail it out to me, I'll sign it and send it in. Now you don't have $800,000 going for something like that. You have, coordination and $20,000 or $30,000, and that funding's around. So then the citizens can put forth their own initiatives and bring things before the voters that will put a check, the inspect that Tom was talking about, in order for the citizens here to get what they expect.
I think that's really good. Let's move on to the next part that we cover under the toolbox, and it was the referendum, right? The Board of Supervisors.
I think the next one was the initiative. Oh no, we talked.
We just covered the initiative, and that's where what we were just covering, where the supervisor can also put something themselves on a ballot, right?
Well, the supervisors can do both. They can put their own initiative on the ballot
without any signatures.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, they just have to get 3, one for each signature. That
3 of the 5 supervisors decide it's going on the ballot.
The other, they can also, maybe a better way to think of it is that every tool that's available to the voter is available to the supervisor also. Well, the initiative and the referendum, obviously they're not going to recall themselves. Anyway, we're about headed to a break here, and maybe I'll talk through the referendum kind of quickly after the break.
Yeah, let's do that when we come back here on U-Turn Radio.
We'll be right back to U-Turn after this commercial break. Don't go away.
Let your mind run wild, let your spirit fly. Forget the ways that used to be. You can't lose yourself or anyone else. came to be. On the road to Tonalea, beneath dark skies and ancient footprints, you can't forget about the past. Breathe deep in a rhythm.
How would you feel if you had to make a choice between buying food or spending your fixed income on life-saving medicine? No one should make that trade-off, but many low-income seniors are forced into difficult decisions like this every day. Smiles for Seniors Foundation provides energy assistance and safety net services to struggling low-income seniors in the Inland Empire. They provide one-time assistance to seniors to meet specific financial needs. They've helped with food, housing, utility payments, minor home and auto repairs, along with life-saving prescriptions or medical equipment. A nonprofit foundation funded entirely by donations from local organizations. Smiles for Seniors receives no funding from the state or federal government. They are funded by local businesses and individuals like you with big hearts and willing wallets. You can find more information or to donate to Smile for Seniors at 909-790-6671. That's 909-790-6671, or visit smilesforseniorsfoundation.org. That's smilesforseniorsfoundation.org.
Tom, Nadia, and Eric are back with more only on the U-Turn Radio Show right here on KCAA.
Welcome back to U-Turn Radio. That track you guys just heard is from Blue Skies and Red Wines. You can find more of their music on mountainmusic.net. That's mountainmusic.net. What you just heard there on our commercial break. Before our commercial break, we kind of were going over the toolbox that we're reviewing, and it's kind of more of what the citizen can do to see within. So before the commercial break, we stopped at the referendum, right?
Right, and I'll blast through the last two of these because it's a little bit thick. But yeah, there's a referendum, and basically if there's an ordinance coming down the pike or a law coming down the pike, citizens can get together, get 10%, same number as the other one, and submit it. And if you get it in time, the Board of Supervisors has a couple options. Basically, they can decide, okay, we won't implement it. We'll only implement parts of it. But even if they decide to do that, they still have to put it on a ballot. And it has to go before the voters. So the question came up about the parcel tax that they're gonna try to put on the folks in the non-incorporated areas. I don't really understand the LAFCO process and how that all interacts. But if an ordinance comes out of it, there's the potential that.
So when does the time start ticking on that? The Board of Supervisors voted to stick the people in the unincorporated areas with $157 on every parcel, right? No, I think, I'm not certain, but I believe it's going through the LAFCO process. So that the 30 days to do a referendum on that, for instance, would not start, or it has started? No,
I don't believe that it's started yet, but that takes some research. Mm-hmm. But if I understand it, the Texas and California law says no, it can be preemptive. California law doesn't say that, but it's prior to the effective date of the ordinance. If you drop your signatures, then they can't implement it without a vote without putting it on the ballot.
So just taking a pause right there. What they're trying to do, and this ended up being all the people that are in the districts of the county. The county is divided into 5 districts. 3 of them are kind of urban districts, San Bernardino City, Rancho Cucamonga, Chino Hills, those areas where there's not much unincorporated areas. And then 2 of them, Janice Rutherford's District 2 and Robert Lovingood's District 1, have a lot of rural area that is not part of a city. It's just part of the county, big, vast pieces of land that are divided up and owned by a bunch of people. So the they got the supervisors that were from the urban areas got together and decided it'd be great to raise some money, and they should do so by putting a tax on all the unincorporated parcels, which largely are in District 2 and District 1, who, for political reasons or whatever, obviously voted against it, but were outvoted 3-2. So having voted to put that through, and I guess it's going through a process, the citizens they try to get around the Proposition 13 requirement that you can't put something on there without a 2/3 vote of the citizens. Somehow they've got that turned around to you can put something on there unless 50% or more of the citizens write in and say they object to it. And if 50% or more write in and say they object to it, then it doesn't have to count. But in counting the 50%, you count people who vote and don't vote. So it's a huge amount of people you would need to write in against this to stop it. But I believe, from what I'm hearing, Tom, that you could probably get 10% of the people to put their signature to a referendum and stop it that way. Might be much easier than trying to get 50% to be people to write letters in.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like I said, it's got to do some research in terms of LAFCO and the powers granted to LAFCO by the state.
Well, let's make sure that we know when that deadline is, because that's an opportunity for us to show some success early, because there's certainly 10% of the people that
they'd be interested in
that would be interested in not getting stuck with that tax, or even 10%, even people that are renting that don't want their rent going up accordingly, and that type of deal. And it's all a result of taking on more fire expense. When San Bernardino City couldn't handle their own expenses, including the huge pensions and whatnot, the San Bernardino City Fire somehow got themselves taken over by the county, and the county has to pay a bunch of money for it, and they're looking for money for this, and they've separated out certain people in the county that are a subset, and they're going to go give them a tax.
That's about the size of it.
Yeah. Well,
the last tool is the recall, and that's just if you have a elected official that you want to recall, it's the process to do that. That's a tool in the voters' toolbox. I don't believe that we're certainly at that point with any of the Board of Supervisors, so it might be a good idea to move on to strategies on how to employ the tools, and kind of going back.
Well, again, even the recall is a 10% to, you say 10% to 15% of the voting people's signatures. Let's nail that down, because that could be a strategy if we could get, again, 10% of involved citizens. Then
it's a sliding scale. You got time and you got number of signatures you need to get. You get for a district in the county, I'm guessing, but it's probably going to be 180 days, because there's likely going to be between 10,000 and 50,000 voters in that district. If it's higher, then they get a little more time. Same thing with the number of signatures.
But it's between 10 and 15% of the people that vote that you would have to get to initiate a recall.
Registered voters.
Yeah.
So let's say that a district, let's say D1 had less than 50,000 registered voters in it.
Mm-hmm.
Then to implement a recall out there, you'd get 120 days to gather your signatures, and you'd have to get 20% of those people to sign off on it.
I have a quick question with the signatures. How do they make sure that those signatures are real? Or is
that's
that
why
like
Tom
a
says
different
that when the actual requirement last go around was 27,000 signatures, he said that you had to maybe collect 40,000, because they get sent into the registrar of voters, and they check the signatures against their registered voter databases and that type of thing. And these paid signature gatherers are paid on first you have the people that are supervising them checking them to see if they're valid, and then they go into the registrar of voters and you get checked again. So I don't think for most initiatives that the bad signature rate is that high. When we got the signatures to put the supervisor pay item on the ballot in 2012, we only required less than a 3 or 4% overrun to count for bad signatures. And so the registrar of voters then takes a sample of them, and they'll go through a sample, and if they take 100 signatures and 2 of them are bad, they'll figure, well, if you turn in like 4% over, we're good. They don't necessarily count and check every one.
Gotcha.
If they do it 100 signatures, 10 of them are bad, they'll say, well, you got to turn in 15% more, 20% more. So they do it by statistical sampling.
Okay. So just from our toolbox, just to go not over it again, but the most popular and the one that I think we are all kind of known to is the vote. And that's why the vote is very important when we have our elections for anything here in the county.
Yeah, so let's talk about a strategy using the vote as the tool.
Or just talk about the last election where you saw, generally 2 politicians running for each of these. People are used to seeing 2 people run, and somebody is coming from the right and somebody's coming from the left, and that's what it's broken down to largely in our supervisor races. But there's no reason really for right or left in a lot of respects, because these aren't people that are dealing with national legislation or state legislation. These are people that, are coming from some background that are getting a $5 billion budget placed in their hands. And if their background to that is, running a small restaurant or a souvenir stand or something like that, which this is not out of the question. I think that's the background of some of the supervisors. The voters don't really have a good choice to put somebody in there who understands the significance of what they're doing. They do understand, however, the significance of getting reelected, so then they start getting the pressure from everybody. And the people who have become good at that over time are politicians, and you get yourself a board of supervisors that's largely politicians and not anybody in the room when they're discussing things saying, hey, but if you do that, this might happen or that might happen. So certainly there's a need to get some choice before you go to vote. It's really, one politician or another, in the end you're going to get the same thing. They're going to try and smooth over whatever they do and explain it to the largest amount of people so they get reelected. If you can get some choice and get a citizen who's in there to try and make some change on a particular part of what he sees as a problem, the voters should have a choice to put somebody like that on. But it's even at 200,000 or 400,000, this is not within the reach of everybody to go run for supervisor and have a credible campaign.
Right. So let's in 2020, District 1, 3, and 5 will be on the board, and I'm looking past obviously this general election because that's already done. It was finished at the primary. So 2020, what in terms of strategy, what would the Red Brennan Group and U-Turn Radio like to see on that ballot in 2020 in terms of numbers of names running for supervisor?
Well, we'd certainly like to see there be a primary and a final election, which we're not having right now. It's all over and done with in June.
Yeah, two-horse race in June.
Somebody's going to get over 50%, and that's it. If you have 3-4 people like they have in Jeff Hewitt's race over in Riverside County, you got somebody that's from the outside that's never he's been a city council person while he runs his own business, and he did some changes. He's not from the right, from the left. He's libertarian by political affiliation, and he's actually put a fire department in that doesn't have these pensions and doesn't have these pension problems in response to his own city looking at bankruptcy. He did something about it. He fixed it. He has something that's working. So the people in Riverside got a choice because there's 3 people running, and Jeff got 33, 34%, and that was enough to get him into the run-up. So now there's a whole period of time between now and the final elections in November where he can talk to the people there and try and communicate what he can do and what he can do different. And you know, the people have 6-7 more months of really being able to examine it, and they got a clear choice between the way it was done and a different way of doing it.
Right.
San Bernardino County got no choice beyond a quick election in June or whatever, and it was a choice between this politician and that politician, and you really weren't getting anything different whichever way you go.
Right.
So we really need to find a way of getting more people on these ballots, and they should be people that are just, you know, ordinary citizens and have some perspective, and very important to have some, you know, in some cases some business perspective and overall economic perspective on things, because, you know, $5 billion operation is a big operation, and you know, you need to understand that if you don't pay for things now, you're going to have to pay for them later. If you promise benefits for people later and don't pay for them, those chickens are going to come home to roost. And, you know, it's going to be unfair to people later because of how you're doing it now. You need people with that perspective.
But I mean, then when you say later, that person or that supervisor can't really be held accountable because they're now gone, right? I mean, at some point.
They're in it. There's 3-year term limit, and then they're going to vest as much as they can in all their pension that they get it from being a supervisor right now. So they're looking to get reelected twice, and then and Janice Rutherford, for instance, has been reelected twice now. So she's kind of doesn't. You know, you would hope that this being her last time and being term limited out, that she'd feel free to try and do the right thing irrespective of a re-election. But what oftentimes happens is it's like musical chairs, you know. The supervisor goes to assemblyman, the assemblyman goes to supervisor. You got Ramos, the supervisor, not the DA. He's going to be an assemblyman now. And you had
he's running.
the one from Congress, Gloria McLeod,
McLeod.
She wanted to come in and be a supervisor, and Steinorth was a state representative. He wanted to come be a supervisor. So it's all musical chairs. They still have the same, you know, let's get reelected and get some more pension from this group or that group type perspective going on.
But then I can imagine being a little bit difficult for, let's just say, a new supervisor or somebody that wants to come in when when you have these people that have been in these different positions all the time, and kind of like a citizen, that's all we know. So then to have somebody that's probably coming in new, then we're like, oh, well, we don't really know them, but we already know that these people have done this and this and this and this for the community. So I think that at some point it could also be maybe challenging for a new runner to go against these type of people as well at some point.
Well, that's a good point. And a lot of the challenge is, you know, you get somebody from business who's used to doing something. This is not a situation where you can come in and do something. You're one of 5.
Right.
You can only do something if you convince 2 other people on that board to vote along with you to do it.
And it has to be, you know, you're constrained by both the politics.
Yeah.
You got to have 3 or 5, and then you're constrained,
by interpersonal relations with these other people.
And by law and
it's not for everybody, you know.
It's,
for instance, wouldn't be for me, you know. But that's where you have to get, if you, as a group, try and get like-minded people. If there's 3 positions coming up, you know, try and get 3 like-minded people that could go in there, and then people could vote for a change that would involve, you know, 2 or 3 of these people, and really see a change come about. You know, there's some protections in having a lot of people involved, but it also prevents a lot of good qualified people from going into a situation that's frustrating like that. So, and as far as being intimidated by going in there and doing it, you know, I would just urge anyone who would consider it to look into first who is out there that could provide support to them, and that's one of the things we intend in the Red Brennan Group, is to support people, not anybody of our choosing, but anybody who represents a change, who has some perspective, you know, that we think results in fairness and smaller government. And also to look into what are the qualifications of the people that are there if they feel intimidated about going into it all. I mean, the qualifications of the people who are in there now are only that they've, you know, been elected to office before, for the most part. Some are different.
to run for office, you got to be a registered voter and, live in whatever district you're running out of.
Yep.
And at some point, just be, have some type of background. I think what you just said too, like have a little bit of business background, is also helpful because at the end of the day, that's kind of like what you're trying to do and create, even when you walk into these type of meetings and things. It's very familiar to running a business, I can only imagine. Well,
no, it's that, or ask the questions of some business people, that aren't compromised. If you don't know it, find somebody who does know it, who doesn't have an incentive to give you the wrong answer, but has an incentive to give you the right answer, and ask them. So that works well too.
Well, we got to cut to a commercial break. We'll come back with more here on U-Turn Radio with our strategies.
U-Turn is coming right back. Don't go away.
Nothing you can do to ease your pain, and every day it's still the same. You get up in the morning, your bed it ain't too warm, and another man that you would lie next to is gone. This is a hard luck town. There ain't a soul around to pick you up and give you a hand when you're feeling down. This is a hard luck town. They'll kick you when you're down. You better help yourself.
Support the San Bernardino City Mission. Your donations help feed the hungry, provide used clothing for low-income families, provide access to housing and rehabilitation for the homeless, and help all who come to them for help. The mission provides a personalized assistance program for homeless men and homeless women and children. They help get less fortunate off the streets, place them in safe shelters, and get them back on their feet. Last month, the community helped provide over 7,400 meals and provided nearly 2,000 pieces of clothing, as well as almost 180 hygiene kits, which were provided for the needy. San Bernardino City Mission goes above and beyond, though, providing personal counsel, prayer, and a devotion time to encourage those in need in their spiritual life. So listen up, everyone. For a donation of just $1.57, you can feed a hungry person right here in San Bernardino. $15.70 will feed 10 people, and $157 will feed 100 hurting men, women, and children. If you're interested in helping and want to know more additional information, you can go to sanbernardinocitymission.org or call 909-649-0011. 909-649-0011. The San Bernardino City Mission, feeding the hungry, helping the homeless. That number again, 909-649-0011. Or visit them online, sanbernardinocitymission.org.
Tom, Nadia, and Eric are back with more only on the U-Turn Radio Show right here on KCAA.
Welcome back to U-Turn Radio. That track you just heard right now is by Blue Skies and Red Wines. That's Blue Skies and Red Wines. You guys can find more of their music, which is really nice, actually, on mountainmusic.net. That's mountainmusic.net. And their whole album is there. I actually got to check that out, and it was really good music.
Well, actually, it's actually George Coyote Keane.
Yeah, he's like the lead dude, right?
282 combat missions in Vietnam. Lives in San Bernardino County. He's a local singer-songwriter, and Gail Dowling is a local singer-songwriter. And they went to Nashville and got some good studio musicians in Nashville to record songs that they wrote. So it's all original music they wrote.
Oh, nice.
So that's what you're listening to there.
Well, thank you for that background. I didn't know that. Maybe we should have them on and we could talk about it, especially if they're in the community. That would be really awesome to kind of support our local artists here in San Bernardino.
They're both awesome. Pretty old, so, it's...
I think you need old souls sometimes to listen to good music.
Yeah.
Well, before the commercial break, we were talking about supervisors, and I kind of asked, like, it could be difficult to maybe run for supervisor if you don't come from that, or if you're running against people that have been in those positions and stay within the government or the community to keep working. So it might be challenging for somebody. I also said that maybe if you have a kind of like a business background, it would kind of probably be easier to kind of run or do these type of moves. But Tom, you had a point that you wanted to bring up.
Well, there's some truth to that, particularly on the numbers side. If you're a businessman, you understand numbers. I think that's very helpful.
Right.
Although government math is not always real math, but there's also a whole nother aspect to it that maybe I'll just shorten into. In my opinion, anyone that is elected and put into office, if they're going to serve their constituents well, they need to come into office very, very, very skeptical of the organization that they're now leading. And what I mean by skeptical is that there's no if you're within the government system, there really is no incentive to restrain or constrain spending or your exercise of power. There's not an incentive to do that. It's not in average government employees' self-interest to restrain themselves if they don't have to. So let's play this out in a practical situation. That county fire, it's not in their best interest to come to the table and say, hey, county, we'd really like to save you some money. So what we're going to do is we're going to reduce our workforce by 10%. We're going to reduce our equipment by 15%. That's never going to happen. No bureaucracy ever has done that. They're going to come to you and they're going to say, we need more, we need more, we need more, because it's the nature of the beast. It's not like these people are wicked. It's just the nature.
Exactly, and let me reiterate that point. I mean, as some of my friends, some of the people that I respect a lot, some of the people that I grew up around that are older that I respect a lot are firemen, and it's not the people, it's the system and the incentives. They're there. You take some of the best people, but anybody's going to do certain things in certain circumstances. If the incentive is there to do something and you're in a group, you get caught up by being part of the group, you get caught up by the incentive, and you're going to act accordingly. That doesn't mean the individual people that are involved, that there's anything wrong with them, or that the fact that they have this employee union that's in there contributing to campaigns and fighting on their behalf is something that, whatever comes out of that, they get huge overtime, they got these huge pensions that are bankrupting cities and all this other stuff. That's a bad result that comes from the lack of control of the actions that you could expect somebody to take if left alone. If you leave somebody alone that's a public servant, you have to understand they're a public servant, but they're also somebody who's trying to get ahead in life like everybody else. And you got to control those things the same way they do in a private setting. If you go into a boardroom in a private setting and you have a self-interest, you got to recuse yourself from that vote, and you can't do it. If a supervisor, for instance, takes a huge amount for his campaign from the public employee unions, he should not be able to vote on their compensation or anything like that. That's just the way it works. But we've gone away from that and said, oh, they got to have a voice, and so now they control things. And you got big developers, property developers doing the same thing. So it's the incentives that are the problem. We're not talking about bad people. We're talking about good people just following what you would expect them to do. And a large part of it is the citizens have to realize that, and the citizens have to, somehow counter that with something that makes sense. And right now, that it really comes down to at election time, who's paying the bills for them to get reelected, and then what comes from that. And what comes from that is pretty much exactly what we got. And the people paying the bills is very easy to track. It's casinos and property developers and public employee unions. So
yeah, and that is what, if you will, what funds elections in the county is.
Yeah.
If you look at it, it's basically either direct contributions or political action campaigns that are funded by public employees or a couple few private interests.
What would you say the benefits of funding supervisors would be, like maybe like the casino or like these private firms that you guys are talking about?
Wait, run that by me again.
What are the benefits of funding? Like if I'm the casino, what's their benefit? What do they get out of funding?
Let's go public employee unions. It's very clear. You've got people who, whenever something comes up to vote for a public employee compensation plan, these guys are contributing to your campaign. You vote to give them something. Does it matter to you
slow down on that one and explain that a little more? So a board of somebody's elected as a board of supervisor, one of the people on the board of supervisors. Often when they're elected, funding for their campaign comes from public employee unions. Okay?
Okay.
So now that elected official sits down at a table like this and begins to negotiate pay and benefits package for that union. So are you tracking with me there?
Yeah, right.
So they essentially stroked a check so that you could get your job as a supervisor, and now you're negotiating their pay and benefits. Is there going to be any inclination to say, we're going to have to draw you back a little bit? It doesn't make sense.
Gotcha.
No. I mean, it's scorched earth when you try and do that. That's kind of the way they set it up for their, the employee union set it up for their people. You're either with us 100% or against us, and if you're not going to keep driving our agenda, then we're going to go back somebody else against you, and with sizable money. And
be interesting to see how that plays out now that the Janus decision of the Supreme Court came down, if you will, on a fiscally conservative approach.
Well, they think that might rein in the unions to some extent.
They're definitely going to have to work harder for to get their contributions. So there was a Supreme Court case where a gentleman sued, said, "Hey, I'm part of a union, and I got to pay into my union dues every year, and my union it does stuff politically that I don't agree with, so I don't want to have to pay that anymore."
Right.
And it made its way all the way up to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court agreed with him.
Okay.
So what that's going to do is we can, and it's just public unions. That should be clear to everybody. It's just public unions. This only applies to public unions, not your local iron workers or something like that. So going forward, you can't force a public employee to buy in to the union, and pay the dues.
Oh wow!
They can choose to.
Yeah.
But they can't.
But do you think these employees sometimes know that when they're buying into the union that's also being part of?
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely.
Is there like a contract, do you think, that they get, or is that how this works?
Well, no, they're. It used to be that if you became police or fire or something like that, you're automatically part of the police or fire union, and the union was able to make sure that there was something taken out of your paycheck to pay their union dues. And now I think they have to get your permission to get that taken out. It's the union members probably are by and large not going to change anything right away, because they get double the pay of the private sector because of the system and what it is. The smart thing would be to just keep funding their union. So I don't think there's going to be a huge thing, but you're going to get some people saying, "Hey, I don't really want to pay that," and they don't have to. So it weakens the unions a little bit. It's still more incumbent on the people. The amount of time that people will go away from supporting their unions is probably more time than most of the citizens have to keep their government organizations stable and not going into bankruptcy and stuff like that. It's the people need to jump in and put limits on everything, and they need to support people in a different way. If unions are going to continue to support people for public office and you can't change that, then it's incumbent on the people to support people against the unions so that they get decisions being made that aren't colored by what is best for the employees, not what is best for the citizens. Because right now it's gone too far, and the employees are getting double what the citizens are on an average basis. And then when it comes to pensions, they're getting about 10 times. And in order to keep that going, they're creating more expansive things for government to do, to justify a bigger role and to grow their organizations. And that intrudes in everybody's life, and it stops us from working like we were supposed to work when this, democracy that we had was drawn up. Takes all the incentive out. The last bastion of liberty is fading.
Which for the record, I am not anti-union at all, particularly unions that are not public.
I was a Teamster. I was a shop foreman for the Teamsters in the day. That's private
I'm
union.
all for that. I'm all for private unions as support anybody's right to associate and
we're not going to change that. What we need to do is we need to find a way that there's a voice for the people and what's going on here. I mean, if the people are getting paid half what people in government are, and they're getting all this regulations and fines and whatnot thrust upon them, what we tend to call oppression here on the show, there's got to be a voice, and we're going to help figure out how to get that done.
Absolutely. So let's cover another strategy, Tom. You have time for the last one?
We're getting pretty close. Let's see.
Well, if we're running out of time, maybe we just pick up again on the next show. But you had asked about how the different people expect something. Let's look at the property developers. That's that. There was some discussion of this Colonies case where these developers, as they do, if they want to build a whole lot of houses, they put a bunch of money into the candidates, and then a new technique they've done is giving awards to, for instance, the county CEO. The property people that are in charge of putting big tracts of homes in gave an award to this Greg Devereaux as being a great county CEO, the best in the state or something like that. And so then, if somebody's going in for a tract of houses, they're probably getting their permits done in less time than two people who are starting out in life trying to build a house. That's become like a 3-year deal and $40,000 of fees, and we talk to those people at the building department. They're it's gotten completely out of hand. There's no service in it. You can't even get anybody to wait on you in the building department for a couple hours. But if you're a big developer and you're giving money to the supervisors and you're giving awards to the county CEO, then you can expect a different treatment, and it's probably a lot easier as a result to put in 400 houses than it is to put in one house. And certainly I would doubt that they, on an equivalent basis, wait the amount of time or pay the amount of money that somebody would be doing personally, because somebody personally doesn't have that same clout. Yeah, they don't have them. They don't have speed dial to call up the CEO who they gave an award to, or the supervisors who they gave a lot of money to, and do it. They just have to go down to the building department, sit there and wait.
Wait there 2 hours.
That's
and
not
they
the way
kind of
it
have
should
to
be.
figure it out too. Let's just also make that clear, because there's some that don't even know how to, and they're just learning. Like, one of the persons that we interviewed, and he kind of Googled his way into how to build what he needed to get done and get the permits that he needed, and Google and YouTube were a lot of help to him.
Yeah, but then you have the elderly couple that were just trying to build a garage, and they're year 2 trying to get their garage built because they couldn't get through the permit process. They don't use, they didn't use the internet.
Yeah,
and
all this stuff is good stuff for the county. I mean, when people build stuff, they create jobs, and after they built it, they've created more value that taxes go back into the county. But they're too short-sighted to see that. They'd rather get the fees and harass them in the process of doing it. So.
And we got that episode on uturnradio.com. You can find more of our episodes on there. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you for joining us.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5